From the team at Sales Loop, it's How to Sell More. Hey there, I am your host, Mark Drager, and each and every week, I bring you a masterclass to tackle the biggest challenge and frankly, the biggest opportunity that every company faces, and that is generating more revenue. So whether you're a business owner or a marketing professional, we are here to help you succeed in sales, even if you're not a natural salesperson. Now, today we are diving into a topic that's key for any business owner, any company looking to shake things up in their industry, and that is how do you build a disruptive brand? I use the word disruptive or disruptor very cautiously because frankly, over the last 5-10 years, I've sat in far too many meetings where people go, we are a disruptor. And I'm not sure if every company can be a disruptor of every industry. But frankly, that's not even the point. Here's the point. If you've ever wondered how to stand out in your crowded market or to turn your bold ideas into business success and opportunities that are going to drive more revenue, then this episode is for you. Because to help us unpack this topic is Simon Duffy. I am honored to be able to have him on the podcast because Simon is a disruptor of the skincare industry, an actual disruptor. Back in 2007, he was the co-founder of Bulldog Skincare, which would go on to become the UK's largest men's skincare brand. Simon and his team grew Bulldog to over 150 million in worldwide sales. They expanded to 35 different countries, and they successfully exited the company back in 2016. Now, Simon didn't stop there though. In 2019, 3 years later, he founded Waken Mouthcare, which is an innovative dental care company that is growing based on sustainable packaging and naturally formulated products. And all of the stuff that made Bulldog successful, he has rolled into Waken, his latest company. We get into all that and a whole lot more in this episode. Now, a few more quick highlights about Simon's career. He's a mentor in entrepreneurship and innovation. He has taught at the New College of Humanities, and I am excited to dive into the lessons Simon shares in this conversation about building a disruptive brand, about working through startup, about taking everything he learned in the first company and rolling it into Waken, his second company. And so without any further ado, I cannot wait to share the conversation that I had with Mr. Simon Duffy. So Simon, I've got to note some of the crazy achievements that you've had over the last 15 years. Okay, so first of all, you worked for one of the world's largest ad agencies. Then in 2006, you struck out on your own and launched Bulldog Skincare, a skincare product company that disrupted the male grooming industry. You were able to scale that to 8 figures plus, and then actually exit it, sell it for a ton of cash. Now you're looking to repeat your success by challenging the old-fashioned thinking in the dental industry with your latest venture, Waken Mouthcare. Now, from the outside, it looks like you've really developed some kind of Kentucky Fried Chicken, secret spices, secret formula for being able to look at an industry, create a disruptive brand, go in there, shake things up. So where I want to start the conversation, if you can, after all of this experience, after all of this time, how do you assess an opportunity like with Bulldog, like with Waken?
Good question. I'm not sure there's a total formula, to be honest. I'm still very much figuring all of this stuff out as we go along. I think there's consistencies between how we thought about Bulldog, how we thought about Waken. One of those would be that we see a huge category challenge to be addressed that the big companies already in the market aren't doing a good job at. So, for example, in men's skincare, men's grooming with Bulldog, it was about 90% of women are using beauty products, skincare products, but only 15% are men. Why is that? Why have these huge companies that have all of the advantages in terms of expertise, marketing, relationships with retailers, not been able to crack this white space in the category? The really exciting thing with Waken is dental feels like a category, if you sort of put it in the perspective of personal care or health and wellness or other things that you buy in the store, where trends like naturals, sustainability, cool independent brands have not yet worked out a formula to disrupt the motherships in mouthwash and toothpaste. It's a really interesting challenge when you think about how big this category is and just how behind it is everything else on trends like naturals and sustainability. So part of if there is a post process, the earliest stage is just trying to identify a big problem that no one else has been able to fix, and we're not saying that we've totally fixed it yet, but we just want to start with something exciting, something big and bold.
I love that. Now, I've heard this from entrepreneurs. I've heard this from family of entrepreneurs. I've heard this from lots of people. There's this idea that if people aren't doing it, they're much further ahead. They have better resources. They're smarter. There must be a reason they're not doing it, right? The first piece of doubt that will always come into your head when you spot an opportunity or when you see something, whether you're creating a new company or something else, is to go, well, if no one's doing this, there must be a reason why. So why spend my time? Why spend my energy? Like, do you ever fall in that trap when you're looking at it? 50% of men use skincare, 90% of women use it. I would go, well, I guess a lot of men just don't care about it.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be really easy to jump to that conclusion, right? There's so many reasons not to start something and get stuck in research or just sort of follow the crowd to really popular areas of consumer products. And in truth, what you were saying, that was the origin of Bulldog, really. Like, I remember it was a really cold, wintry day in New York, and I was going to the local Whole Foods store to get some skincare products for my wife. A huge natural category for women. And I can remember asking the whole body person, like, where's the men's section? And there just wasn't a section in store. And you think, geez, if it's not in New York City, in the big Whole Foods store, perhaps it just doesn't exist. And then you often hear entrepreneurs say it again, that is the sort of quote unquote light bulb moment. There's a gap in the market here. No one seems to be doing these sorts of products in these sorts of ways. The challenge in then the first phase is to work out, is there a market in the gap? What are the reasons for the fact that there isn't a brand? Is it because formulation is impossible? Is it because consumers don't want to buy this stuff? I think that's actually often where big companies trip up in innovation and stuff sort of ends up feeling the same. We spent a little bit of time doing that, but I think, like with every good business, it does start a bit with a hypothesis. Like, you've got to anticipate where the consumer's moving to rather than just sort of ask people where they're at. An example of that is if we were focus grouping opportunities in male skincare, like how a big company would do it, no one would come up in 2006 with natural ingredients for men because the category itself was so small. No one would even say, oh, I'd definitely be in this category if there was a brand named after a dog. You know what I mean? It's like both of those things are hypothesis driven rather than they come out through sort of asking consumers to create your ideas for you. But that's how I sort of want it to be. I want to sort of have a hypothesis and see if we can build something.
And how do you assess? And I mean but I mean, how does one go about assessing whether these inklings, these little light bulb moments, how do you take things further, being cynical or skeptical enough to not just let your hope and dreams take you down the wrong path, but also not keep things so tightly wound up that it just looks like nothing will ever work all the time?
You have to make a start. I mean, I just can't emphasize that enough. There's so many people who have I've spoken with, informally, or friends or people that get in touch and say, I've got a great idea, and delighted to always talk with those people. And often it is a good idea. And then the challenge comes in just getting the momentum to start something for the first time. So I think you can do things to de-risk a launch. You can speak to consumers. You can have preliminary conversations with retailers. You can try and understand whether you can make money at sort of certain points, depending on how you launch. But ultimately, it will be a hypothesis. That's one way to think about it. Is the core competence of consumers is to consume. It's not to create. So you can't keep asking people, hypothetically, would you buy this if X, if Y, if it was launched in this way, if I had this campaign? Ultimately, it's all about just getting it into market in some way and teasing out the learnings once it's in market. And then I think really importantly, and we found that with Bulldog and we're finding that with Waken, once you are in market, you've got to leave your ego sort of at the door. Like, no one nails it first time. And actually, if you think you can sort of come up with a brand or a product, launch it, and then take nothing out of that first 2 years and not be itching to change it within 2 months and then 6 months, and that is not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of strength. That's a sign that you're listening to sort of important people, stakeholders, consumers as you go along, looking to optimize. So that's very much our tactic in terms of innovation: is start with a hypothesis, get it launched. We want to try and make the best job we possibly can to start with, but then we're learning as we go to try and tweak, tease out new routes, change packaging, change ingredients, just to optimize. And I think ultimately that's the only way you can prove to yourself that there's something in your initial idea. And it won't happen overnight unless you're very, very lucky. Perhaps as a tech entrepreneur, you can build a network really, really quickly. But I think consumer products takes a bit slower to sort of move at the speed of your retailers or other things that may slow you down.
That is Such a great point. And I hope we all kind of heard that, because often if I'm speaking to a writer, an author will say, listen, this book that you're reading is not the book I wrote. The book I wrote was 3 times as long and all over the place and meandering. And then I wrote, and then I rewrote, and then I rewrote, and then editors came in and then they helped me frame it. And the book you're reading is like this work that's been workshopped.
Yeah.
Or if you're speaking to a playwright or anyone in kind of the arts, you think you're watching a movie or something on stage. I come from the film industry. I went to film school. And when my teacher told me, oh, you didn't get everything in the first shoot? In editing, you got to go do pickups. What are pickups? What are you talking about? Well, you realize you've missed something, so you go back out and you reshoot.
Yeah.
So you can make the story better. Like you just go and plug the holes, fix things. I think often when we're starting, especially if we're starting something new, we somehow feel that we've got to get everything right. And if we don't get everything right away, we must be a failure of some kind. What you just shared is so inspirational. So how did you at the time when you're launching Bulldog, how did you not fall into that trap of beating yourself up or of just being blindsided with things that you never saw coming? Did this come naturally to you?
Well, did it come naturally? Potentially. Like, I think I've always been a bit more comfortable with the idea of risk compared to at least some of my friends, who have followed much more conventional paths. I mean, if I take a step back and try and think back to what was going through my mind 2005, 2006, that led to the impetus to quit a really good job and start Bulldog with, as you're saying, no industry experience really whatsoever. I'd been a consultant. So at that point, I was sort of doing pretty PowerPoint presentations, like huge rude awakening, running a business. We actually have to do stuff and be responsible for things. And
hold on. No consumer packaged good experience, no real entrepreneurial experience, no startup experience, no fundraising experience. I mean, no retail experience, right?
No. The experience that I had was working as part of this team within Saatchi & who latterly became called Fahrenheit 212, and we were innovation consultants. So it was an amazing job. And it sort of took me to New Zealand, and then it took me to New York. And we would go and sit with the R&D folks at Starbucks, at Coca-Cola, at Diageo, at Samsung. And we would try and sort of inject a creative problem-solving approach to innovation. See if we can help them craft better products. Saatchi would solve communication ideas, and the output would be TV ads. We would try and solve innovation challenges, and the output would be new products. So I took a lot of learning from how these bigger companies think about innovation, both good and bad. So there was, I guess, some skills there. But it also just gave me the confidence to think, especially when you sort of think about how slow these big companies are and how long it takes for them to go from initial idea to market launch, how much research they feel they need to do to get it past various milestones in their own processes. There was definitely a sense that I can actually do this myself. And Rodri, who was my business partner at Bulldog and my business partner at Waken, and we sort of became really close, and it's a good team, and it's still a good team. We sort of together thought, yeah, we can do it. We can actually come up with ideas. But sorry, to answer your question about risk, I really sort of challenged myself to think, what is the real risk of failure at Bulldog? Like, if we launched it and it was a total disaster, and I don't know, 3 years later, we'd lost all of our investors' money and there was no business, how would I feel? And I actually felt 2 things. I felt, firstly, the experience and learning and self-development and sort of putting myself out of my comfort zone and the challenges I would face would be a hugely formative experience. I'd probably be a better person as a result of that. And I suspected I could probably plug back into a similar industry at a not totally different stage. The other thing I sort of identified was, if I look at my own situation, I'm married to Annabelle, my wife. Now she's from New Zealand. We were living in New York. I was starting to think, well, I just want to have a place in New Zealand, a place in London. I want to be able to sort of bounce between the two. I want to be financially unencumbered. I know 100% I'm not going to be able to do that within the sort of salary earning potential of my current job. So I wasn't even giving myself a chance at sort of delivering the lifestyle that I wanted to imagine. And I felt I had much more to lose by not giving this venture a try. And 10 years later, looking back, midlife crisis, doing okay, being the boss, but never even rolling the dice on the lifestyle that I wanted to build for myself, for her, for our family. And I thought that was more risky than actually kicking out and trying to take on P&G and Unilever and Nivea in 2006, 2007.
And as you said at the time, 2006, I have to imagine that these large companies were basically squeezing out skincare products for women, changing a little bit of the scent and throwing it in a blue bottle, and suddenly it's now for men. How did you approach this idea of like, we are going to stand out and know that whatever you're going to do to stand out is actually enough?
Well, I don't know if you ever know it's going to be enough, because that is about discovering along the way. I think we actually had a bit of a process to that with Bulldog, which exactly what you were talking about, being disruptive. We mapped out the conventions in the skincare category and thought there's certain conventions we actually don't want to disrupt. We actually want to be totally predictable. We're going to follow the big brands on certain things. So, for example, distribution, we want to be sat on the same shelf as these brands. We're not going to disrupt that. We're not going to disrupt price points. We're not going to really disrupt the types of products that men would be expecting. It's a face wash, it's a moisturizer. So there were certain things very, very purposefully we actually decided to stay the same. And then we decided
why was that decision made? Is it because it was just not the hill to die on, or because if you're two different people don't even know how to classify you in their brains, or like what?
I think with limited resources, it's very hard to, for what at that point was a low interest category, and we can talk about that perhaps, but I hate that term, low interest category. But for at that point, a category that isn't really working, we thought it was one challenge to get men to opt into skincare products for the first time. It would be even more of a challenge, or perhaps too much to ask initially, to get men to go to a totally different place to buy skincare products than, you know, they're buying razors and blades, or the person in the household, which is often a wife or a partner, is buying the products on their behalf. It was too much to ask them to go to a different place. And also at that point, you know, the internet was obviously around, but this whole D2C flourishing of brands was not quite as developed. So we very deliberately wanted to be, from a distribution perspective, everywhere that L'Oreal and everywhere that Nivea was listed, we wanted to be on the shelf. I think Byron Sharp, you know, in terms of marketing theory, he talks about that as physical availability. Like, don't make it hard for people to buy, make it easy for people to buy. So we just wanted to put ourselves, you know, shoulder to shoulder with the brands that we wanted to compete with, rather than being a farmer's market or a gym or somewhere else when people perhaps aren't anticipating purchasing these products. But we did, back to the question before, really deliberately decide that these are the things where we do want to compete. So we competed on formulation. You know, there was a sort of emerging part of female beauty, natural skincare, no parabens, certain ingredients that you want to use. No one was doing that in men. So that was a brand new way to formulate products. That was a challenge. And then from a branding perspective, all of the products in the men's space were offshoots of female brands, exactly as you said. Take a female formula, put it into a sort of gunmetal grey pack or a blue pack. We wanted to challenge conventions of naming. So it was Bulldog, it was obviously masculine. And we changed subtly sort of packaging cues, like we put it into a tube rather than pot. We made it white and brown so it really stood out. And that was very deliberate. That was about jarring people through differentiation at that point of purchase, with branding execution, packaging execution, ingredient execution. You know, at Bulldog, Rodri and I were guilty of trying to do everything ourselves for too long, not collaborating as effectively, and not getting experts who are actually way better than us into role quickly. So we held up the trajectory by sort of being too much into the weeds. And it's really important to try and understand every aspect of your business. But what we've been doing with Waken is, in terms of the team, we're sort of where we were at Bulldog, perhaps year 7 in year 2. So we put way more resource into putting experts into role sooner. It's because we're sort of hoping to go quicker. There's probably countless other things that we should be doing that we're not doing. Like, for example, we've launched products and we're just itching to improve the way that we communicate the benefits on the front of the pack. And we've learned about flavor and which flavors people like versus which flavors people perhaps don't like. We're learning all the time about our online business, how to acquire customers, sort of what sort of bundles they want. So as you'd expect, you sort of know the things you need to be getting better at, but every single day is about learning and improving and optimizing one small part of the business.
Hey there, it's Mark. We will get right back to my conversation with Simon Duffy. But first, I just wanted to take a quick moment to share with you how I can help grow your business. So at Sales Loop, my award-winning B2B branding and marketing agency, we partner with leaders like you, people who are ready to take their business to the next level. And my team and I can help you build out a bold, strategic brand that shares your company story, that sets you apart from your competition, and frankly, that sets you and your team up to drive a lot more sales. Now, as a listener of this podcast, I have to believe that you get the sense that I like helping businesses stand out and sell more. I mean, that's what I am all about. So I just might be able to help you do that for your company too. So if you have any questions about this, about working with us, or about current strategies that we're rolling out, or really about anything at all, I'd love to connect with you. You can find me over on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. And if you'd like to learn more about the work that I do day to day, you can head over to our website at salesloopbrand.com. So with that, let's get back to the show. You create this little company and you're taking on these massive Goliath organizations. Now, we know time and time again that speed to market, listening to the customers, R&D, being able to pivot is the very edge that gives the little guy against the big person. You know, the fact that you're willing to take risks that really you don't have much to embarrass yourself with because you don't have the shareholders and the stocks and the public, all of that stuff. You can just try stuff, do stuff, and move really, really quickly. In the back of your mind, I mean, you're gonna make it. Of course, you're gonna make it, because if you don't give up, you will. But at a certain point, you got to come across their radar. And what's to stop them from just taking all of your good stuff and doing it?
Well, in short, nothing. You know, if people wanted to copy Waken, all of the ingredients are on the back of the bottle. So, and it was the same at Bulldog. You know, you have to disclose what goes into these products in order to comply with regulations. So, you could take a product to a contract manufacturer and have it knocked off, and it wouldn't be identical, but you could do it. So
you can analyze these. I had a flavor manufacturer that would have all of these. I'm sure you know, right? Like they give you the exact chemical compounds of every single thing that's in there, and then they go away and they toil away and they figure out the process, and they can reverse engineer almost anything.
And some of the retailers that we worked with regularly do that. You know, you ahead of coming in for a sort of discussion on price, they'll get contract manufacturers in to pitch their buying teams. And, you know, we're thinking of doing a private label for this retailer. How much would it cost to do X, Y, or Z? And you know, packaging, labor, materials, all of that stuff. They have a really clear view of what they could get these products for. And then it comes really then down to brand execution, loyalty that you can generate from consumers, and sort of outside of business, just that ability to generate a relationship with people, sort of inspiring them with a vision of perhaps how they're the part of this huge business that they're sort of specifically focused on, how you can help them to grow it, attract new people into it, getting people to buy into the category challenges as we've defined it. So there's an art to the sell, but in short, in skincare and beauty and cosmetics, products are fairly easy to replicate, and actually never been more so. You just have to look at all of these D2C businesses that are launching just with stuff that gets bought off Alibaba, and you see the same sort of products branded up in different ways. And if you are entrepreneurially minded, you could get products from Alibaba onto a Shopify website, into a Shopify-enabled warehouse, and go from no idea to a functioning online business in, say, 6 weeks. You know, the big time thing would be getting the stock over from China in the first place. So it's never been easier to launch businesses. That's actually a really cool thing about where we find ourselves today.
But it just proves the importance of that brand, that narrative, that story, that connection with the customers.
Yeah.
So it almost seems like this is once you have the product, it comes back to being an exercise in being able to create that narrative, that story, that brand.
Absolutely. And it's about execution. I mean, I can't overestimate that really. Like, it starts with a good idea or a reasonable idea that becomes a good idea through iteration. And that's the first 10% or whatever it is. Like the great majority, I think, of the successful brands are brands that are able to grow every year, expand distribution, expand awareness, get more people to try them. And it doesn't happen overnight. It just happens over time by gradually, building those connections with consumers, getting them to tell their friends, being visible in more places. So it's just constant execution, reminding people that you exist, making great products, telling a good story, building the narrative, building the dream. At every single opportunity where you can deliver a positive brand message, whatever touch point it is, that's what you've got to focus on.
So I know with every entrepreneurial journey, from the outside, it looks like, hey, rocket ship to success. But no one goes through startup and fundraising and then product launch and getting into retailers and growing and scaling a business. No one gets through that clean. Share with me a time where really a lot of things were on the line and you realized, oh gosh, we got to do a better job at this.
Well, there was this horrible period, actually, probably 3 or 4 years into Bulldog, where we were, from a financial perspective, getting close to the end of the money that we'd raised or had managed to retain from the sort of trading of the business. And we were called up to the merchandising center of this huge retailer in the UK. This is where they build out their future plans for products in stores. And we walked in daunted and nervous, sort of based on the buyer that we knew we were meeting, had quite a fierce reputation that preceded him. And we turned the corner and the Bulldog assortment on the shelf was just amazing. There was like 12 products. It was eyeline. It was like massively exceeded our expectations about how it would end up. And we were like, wow, that's incredible. Thank you. And the bar turned around and said, yeah, it's not going to happen. We've done everything we can. We wanted to do this for you, but your sales are terrible. I've asked you to do this. You haven't done it. I've asked you to do this and you've been slow to do this. I'm going to have to delist you completely. And at that point we were thinking, this is game over, because the retailers tend to not always, but they're very aware of what's happening in elsewhere. So if you lose momentum in one place, it can just sort of spread throughout the whole market.
Hold on. So you walk into this like R&D showroom or something that has all of the shelves, and your product is beautifully displayed exactly where you want it, and you're completely excited. Followed by the way, we're pulling everything off the shelves.
It's probably some neat sales trick that they teach you, but I mean, it was from like the best possible expression of the brand that we'd ever seen. We were told that we were going to get delisted from the biggest retailer in the UK at that time, and it was definitely a moment of sort of questioning whether we had the right product, whether we had wasted our time to date. And the key thing I think that we took from that was we really tried to understand, with this difficult personality, what was the main barrier that was sort of preventing him from believing in the potential that we had, because we certainly hadn't delivered to date, the fact-based evidence to suggest that we did deserve to sort of retain. And it came down to packaging. We hadn't yet optimized the packaging to sort of get people to want to try it. There was a disconnect between when people use the product, oh, that's really nice, I really enjoy this, to when they looked at the pack, a lot of people were saying, this isn't for me. And the challenges of a very small business with limited resources is that at that moment, I think we identified we need to change the pack. But it was a very difficult decision to make when you've got a warehouse full of 200,000 units or whatever it was of old packaging, which would then become obsolete. And I think it's hard, but you have to sort of treat feedback as a gift. And it would have, I think, been easy to ignore that and try and just sort of carry on. But it was a real moment where we decided we really have to wrap our hands around this problem. That's probably, if we've been fair, been at the back of our minds, as we haven't quite cracked the different elements of how we're communicating the story through the packaging. So we went back, we redesigned it, we figured out what to do with all of this obsolete stock. And then we sort of rebuilt up from a really, really reduced footprint in this retailer. It was definitely a backward step for a couple of years. We shrunk the assortment right down. But in retrospect, a really galvanizing thing in terms of people, our rate of sale went up. We felt the new version of the products that were provoked by that really drove more intention to purchase by people in the UK. And it was also actually really galvanizing internationally. Like at that point, we were trying to build our business in Sweden, build our business in America, just in Whole Foods and the natural specialty channel. So doing it in a small controlled way. And the new packaging that was all came from this really horrible meeting empowered that actually. So that was probably in a small way, quite a big turning point for the brand in about year 3, year 4, something like that.
Oh, there's so much to that, because often I know for myself, I know with our products, with our services, but I've heard this time and again from clients. There's this little inkling, especially if you're a visionary, especially if you're a creator, there's this little inkling that things could be better.
Yeah.
But you've got a lot on the go. And so in your heart of hearts, you know that you're not delivering what you want or where you want it to be. Or, I mean, a perfect example, if you're producing content and you find your content boring, trust me, other people find your content boring too, right? If you look at your product and you're not excited about it, then why would anyone else get excited about it? But for those of us who are perfectionists, we're also trying to guard ourselves from falling in the trap of like making everything perfect all the time. And so, I mean, this guy comes out of the blue. He says, this is maybe it's a wake-up call, but you have to figure out how to slow down, make a new investment, write off previous investments, and yet 3 or 4 years later, you can look back and say it was worth it.
Yeah, and you have to actually hunt out. It felt a bit aggressive at the time, and it was like nerve-wracking, and we did a lot of soul searching. But actually, that really difficult feedback led to a really positive outcome. A different retailer at the time, who we were trying to get distribution with for the first time, would go up and we'd have meetings, and they'd be so polite. They'd be like, "We love it. It's like a really good product. I really like you guys. It's a really good story. I think that I've got everything I need." And then nothing ever happened. And I look back on those meetings and think, perhaps that person was just unwilling to say, "I don't like your products." 2 young entrepreneurs who they knew pretty much had everything riding on the success of this business. It's probably hard in that moment to give difficult feedback. I think the lesson is that the person who was direct enough to tell us it was rubbish at that point actually saved the business by just being honest and, in his own aggressive way, managed to precipitate a really positive behavior from the team at Bulldog. So we sort of look back on those times now happily, but at the time, and in the end, we managed to sort of solve the problem. But at the time, it was daunting. Yeah, we took the opportunity to sort of look back on some of the decisions that we've made or the hypothesis that we make and sort of reassess. You don't normally get that at sort of year 2 when you're sort of setting up a business, year 1, year 2. Like, have we made the right bets? I mean, if there's one thing that we feel absolutely was true when we started, and we feel even more excited about now, is that this hypothesis that we can make people care about dental products for different reasons. People do want products that look beautiful in their bathroom. People are interested in sustainability. People do like the taste of natural mint versus artificial mint. So can a dental brand take on some of these characteristics that you might associate more with beauty? Absolutely. We're getting leading beauty influencers and magazines talking about mouthwash where they've never talked about the incumbent brands before. So we are proving the hypothesis that we set out, that the way that these brands are currently behaving, the brands that are there before us, is just one way. We can present a totally different approach if we put our mind to it. In terms of business development, we've got a lot of work to do from where we find ourselves as of at this moment.
I love it. Final question for you, Simon. For you personally, as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a business owner, as a marketer, at the end of the day, what does it all come down to?
Well, for me, it's about challenge. I think what I appreciate most about Waken, and when I look back at the most exciting parts about Bulldog, it was just the opportunity to, set out on an adventure and try and take on these huge companies, and doing it with a small team that can inspire you day to day. And I would be most proud if we could encourage these big companies that hitherto are sort of behaving in a really average way, I would say, to think more sustainably, think more positively. Like an example of that with Bulldog was we launched sort of razor made from bamboo and metal, and then latterly we launched one that was made from recycled beer bottles. So it's dramatically less plastic in the core device, dramatically less plastic or no plastic. It was sort of packed in cardboard. You sort of remember 5 years ago the categories, all these like plastic device and a plastic tray and a plastic shell that you can't get open without scissors. Like, you look in the category today now, everybody is presenting their products in a more sustainable and thoughtful way. And I think that is at least one example of Bulldog acting as a thought leader where perhaps it can't be the share leader. That is what I want to look back on with Waken, is yes, we were able to build a business of a meaningful scale and all the excitement that comes with that, personally, professionally, financially. But more than anything, like, the real why is this is a category that has completely ignored what people want in terms of more sustainable options. Just think about all that stuff going to landfill, the fact that the packaging choices that these big brands make almost mean they have to go to landfill. Like this, no one is really addressing this. If we could just encourage everybody to revisit the choices that they're making and encourage the biggest brands, which would have way more impact than what we could do with Waken, to think in a more environmentally positive way, that would be hugely personally satisfying, and also, like, I think really good for the planet, really good for consumers who are looking for those products. So I think that's what I'd like to be able to, 10 years from now, that the whole category is behaving in a more positive way, and Waken is a brand within that.
And that was my conversation with Simon Duffy. If you'd like to learn more about Simon or Waken Mouthcare or even Bulldog Skincare, you can find him on all of the Googles out there. But if you want to learn more, head over to his company website, wakencare.com, or you can connect with him on the socials. He is on Instagram. His handle is @DuffySI, or he's over on LinkedIn, Simon Duffy. Now, while you're over on LinkedIn, feel free to give me a look up as well. My name is Mark Drager. My details are in the episode show notes, and I would love to connect with you over there. Now, one last thing, if you are still with me, if you've made it this far into the show, you really should subscribe, and here's why. Each and every week, we share actionable strategies and tips, just like what Simon shared with us today, to help you grow your business and boost sales. So with that, I want to thank you for listening. It really does mean a lot to me. We're going to wrap up this episode. I am Mark Drager, and I will catch you in the next one.